Imagine someone walks up to you today and says they have a solution to homelessness. A real one. Scalable, weather-resistant, faster to deploy than any government program you have ever seen, and cheap enough that a single donor writing a modest check could house a dozen people by next month. You lean in. You are ready to hear about some revolutionary new material, some Silicon Valley breakthrough, some billionaire's grand experiment, and then they point to a drainage pipe sitting in a construction yard. A concrete drainage pipe. And they say, that is the house. The scale problem no one wants to talk about. Before you laugh, stay with me, because the numbers behind what is happening on American streets right now make the pipe home sound a lot less ridiculous than it did 30 seconds ago. According to the federal government's own count from January 2025, exactly 745,000 people were experiencing homelessness on a single night across the United States. Nearly 150,000 of them were children. That number dropped slightly from the all-time record set in 2024, but only slightly, and nobody in the business of counting these things is celebrating, because the gap between slightly better and actually solved is still measured in hundreds of thousands of human beings sleeping outside tonight. And here's the part that should make everyone angry, regardless of where you stand politically. The United States does not have a shortage of ideas about how to fix homelessness. What it has is a shortage of speed. The average affordable housing development in a major American city takes between 5 and 10 years from concept to ribbon cutting. The permitting process alone, before a single nail is driven, can consume 2 to 3 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars in consultant fees and legal reviews. A person sleeping under a highway overpass tonight does not have 5 years. They do not have 5 months. They have tonight. And then they have tomorrow night and the night after that. This is the gap where people fall through, not because nobody cares, not because there is no money, but because the machinery of official solutions moves at a speed that the urgency of the problem has never once respected. Which brings us back to the pipe, because somewhere in that gap, between the problem that exists right now and the solution that is still 5 years away, a concrete drainage pipe started looking less like an industrial component and more like a front door. Where the pipe home idea came from, the idea did not start in America, and it did not start with homeless advocacy, which is the detail that tends to surprise people when they first hear this story. It started in Austria. In 2005, a designer named Andreas Strauss converted large Rocco concrete pipes, the kind typically used for stormwater drainage infrastructure, into hotel rooms along the Danube River in Linz. He called the project Das Parkhotel, which translates roughly to the Park Hotel. Guests booked a pipe online, showed up, crawled inside, and slept on a proper mattress inside a 4-foot diameter concrete cylinder. There was no front desk. There was no breakfast buffet. There was just a curved concrete wall, a sleeping bag, and a lock on the wooden door that guests controlled from their phone. The project was intended as an art installation and a commentary on minimalist living. It was not intended to solve anything. But the internet got hold of it. And the internet, as the internet tends to do, decided that this strange Austrian art project was actually a housing idea. By the early 2010s, architects and urban designers across Asia had taken the concept in a completely different direction. In Hong Kong, where the average living space per person is among the smallest of any city on Earth, designers began publishing serious proposals for pipe homes as a response to the housing crisis crushing the city's lower-income residents. The average monthly rent for a subdivided apartment in Hong Kong in 2022 was the equivalent of roughly 1,200 American dollars for a space smaller than a parking space. Against that backdrop, a concrete pipe with a wooden platform, a curtained door, and a small ventilation fan started sounding less like absurdist architecture and more like a reasonable alternative. In Vietnam, informal pipe communities had existed for decades before any designer gave them a name. Migrant workers moving into Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City had been sleeping in large concrete drainage sections left at construction sites for years, not because anyone planned it, because the pipe was there and the night was cold and they needed somewhere to be. The formal version of the idea, the intentionally designed, manufactured, and deployed pipe home built specifically for homeless populations, emerged around 2015 to 2020 from a combination of nonprofit housing advocates, architecture school programs, and a handful of individual builders who looked at drainage infrastructure the same way Elvis Summers looked at plywood. as raw material for a door that locks. What $2,500 actually buys you. So what does $2,500 actually buy you when you are talking about a concrete pipe home? More than you think, and less than you want. Both of those things are true simultaneously, which is kind of the whole story of emergency housing in miniature. A standard pipe home built for homeless deployment is typically constructed from high-density concrete pipe with an interior diameter of between 6 and 8 feet. 6 feet is functional, 8 feet is almost comfortable, which I realize is a sentence I never expected to write in my life, but here we are. The pipe itself is usually between 8 and 12 feet long, giving you between 48 and 96 square feet of interior floor space when you account for the curved walls eating into usable area at the sides. The concrete is not a compromise. That is the part that surprises most people, because when you say concrete pipe home, the first image most people get is a drainage ditch, and the second image they get is a person curled up inside something cold and damp and miserable. But concrete has a property that makes it genuinely useful for low-cost housing, and that property is thermal mass. Concrete absorbs heat during the day and releases it slowly at night. In a climate with warm days and cool nights, a well-positioned concrete pipe home maintains a remarkably stable interior temperature without any mechanical heating system at all. Builders who have deployed pipe homes in mild climates report interior temperatures staying within a 10-degree range across a full 24-hour cycle, even on days when the outside temperature swings by 30 degrees or more. The $2,500 price point typically covers the pipe itself, a poured concrete or treated wood platform base to keep the structure level and off the ground, a fitted wooden door with a deadbolt lock, 1 or 2 cut ventilation openings fitted with screened covers, and a basic interior finishing package that includes a sleeping platform, a small shelf unit, and interior insulation panels bonded to the curved walls. Some builds include a solar-powered LED interior light. Some include a small folding table that mounts to the wall. The best ones include a rain channel cut around the door frame to prevent water from pooling at the entrance, which sounds like a minor detail until you are trying to get into your home in the middle of a Mississippi rainstorm and realize the entire front of the pipe has become a waterfall. Is it a mansion? No, it is a concrete pipe, but it has a door that locks. And in the world of emergency housing, a door that locks is not a luxury, it is the whole ballgame. The first thing you notice when you step inside, there is no way to prepare for what it actually feels like to step inside one of these things for the first time. I want to be honest with you about that because every description I read before stepping inside one made it sound either much worse or much better than reality. The first thing you notice is that it is quieter than outside. That sounds obvious, but it is not. Concrete is dense. Sound does not pass through it the way it passes through a tent wall or a wooden pallet shelter or even a standard drywall interior. The traffic noise that was present 5 seconds ago when you were standing outside becomes muffled and distant the moment you cross the threshold. For a person who has been sleeping outside for months, who has been sleeping with every sound of the street pouring directly into their ears every single night, that quiet is not a small thing. Former residents have described it as the first moment they felt safe in months. Not comfortable. Safe. There is a difference. The second thing you notice is the curve. The walls are not flat. The ceiling is not flat. Everything bends. And that does something to the psychology of the space that is genuinely hard to explain until you experience it. A square room with flat walls at close range feels like a box. A curved room at close range feels like something built to hold you. I am not an architect, and I cannot tell you exactly why those two things feel different, but they do. Multiple residents of pipe home communities across Asia and Europe have described the curved interior as feeling protective rather than confining. And the research on this, which we will get to in a few minutes, actually backs that up in ways that are more than just poetic. The light inside depends entirely on how the pipe is oriented and what ventilation openings were cut during manufacturing. A well-designed pipe home with the opening facing south and a ventilation window cut into the upper rear of the pipe has genuinely pleasant diffused natural light through most of the day. A poorly oriented pipe with no secondary ventilation has the ambiance of a parking garage at midnight. Design matters enormously here. The difference between a well-built pipe home and a poorly built one is the difference between a space that feels like a thoughtful studio apartment and a space that feels like a drainage ditch with a mattress in it. Both are technically the same object. One of them is a home. The temperature, if the insulation panels have been properly installed, stays cooler than outside on hot days and warmer than outside on cold nights. The concrete does its job. The smell is mineral and faintly damp in the first few weeks, the way a new basement smells, and then it fades as the interior materials off-gas and settle. Residents who have lived in pipe homes for several months report that the smell becomes indistinguishable from any small indoor space. The floor is the one area where the design compromise is most visible. Because the pipe is a cylinder, the floor is curved at the edges, which means a flat sleeping platform has to be built inside the curved base, and the gap between the platform edge and the pipe wall creates a channel that collects dust, small objects, and occasionally ambitious insects. Every resident who has lived in one for more than a month has a story about something rolling into that gap and disappearing forever. Consider yourself warned. The daily reality: water, power, heat, and everything else. Now here is the part of the video where I have to stop describing how interesting the architecture is and start describing what Tuesday actually looks like. Because living inside any structure without running water, without a connected sewage system, and without grid electricity is not an aesthetic experience. It is a logistical problem that starts fresh every single morning. Water is the first problem of every day. Pipe home communities that are properly organized and supported by a nonprofit or government partner typically include shared water stations, the kind of insulated stainless steel dispensing units you see at outdoor events, positioned throughout the village, and refilled on a daily or every other day schedule. Each resident carries water into their pipe in 2 or 5 gallon containers and manages it carefully. Drinking, washing, cooking, and basic hygiene have to come out of whatever is in those containers. People who have done this for more than a few weeks become extraordinarily efficient with water in a way that would genuinely impress most American households, which is a group of people who use an average of 80 to 100 gallons of water per person per day without thinking about it once. Electricity in a well-designed pipe home community comes from one of 2 sources: either a shared solar array that runs a low-voltage DC distribution line to each unit, or individual small solar panels, typically in the 60 to 100 watt range, mounted on a simple wooden frame above the pipe opening. A 60-watt panel in a reasonably sunny climate will charge a modest battery bank enough to run LED lighting for 8 to 10 hours, keep a phone charged, and power a small fan. It will not run a refrigerator. It will not run an air conditioner. It will run the things that make the difference between a space that feels livable and a space that feels like a cave. Heat and cooking run on propane in most pipe home communities. A single burner camp stove and a small propane canister is the standard setup. Cooking happens either inside with careful ventilation, which means the rear ventilation opening needs to be unobstructed, or outside under a small awning that better resourced communities build over each unit's entrance. I want to be honest here. Cooking inside a 6-foot diameter concrete pipe on a propane burner without proper ventilation is genuinely dangerous. And the builders who do this responsibly know that ventilation is not optional. It is not a finishing touch. It is a life safety requirement. The toilet situation. I promised I would get here, and here we are. Shared composting toilet facilities or portable restroom trailers are the standard solution in organized pipe home villages. The ratio that most nonprofit operators aim for is 1 toilet unit per 8 to 10 residents. Whether that ratio is actually achieved in practice depends entirely on the funding level and the organization running the community. In under-resourced implementations, the ratio stretches further, and the consequences are exactly what you would expect. This is the area where the gap between a well-run pipe home village and a poorly run one is most consequential. And it is the area where advocates push hardest for baseline standards before any community is declared open. Winter deserves its own paragraph. Concrete's thermal mass helps in mild climates. In a place that regularly drops below 20 degrees Fahrenheit overnight, a concrete pipe with interior insulation panels and no mechanical heat source will get cold. Full stop. Residents in colder climate pipe home deployments use the same strategies as everyone else sleeping in small unheated spaces. Layered bedding, thermal sleeping bag liners, draft sealing around the door frame with foam tape, and in some cases, small ceramic space heaters running off the solar battery bank on the coldest nights. A small ceramic heater draws between 200 and 300 watts. Your 60-watt panel running through a modest battery bank is not going to cover that for long. The communities that have solved this problem have solved it with better solar infrastructure, not better design. The pipe is doing everything a pipe can reasonably do. At some point, physics takes over. What the research says about people who live in them. Here is what the research actually says about people who live inside these things. And I am going to ask you to hold on to this section because it is the part that changes the way you see this whole conversation. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Urban Health compared outcomes for homeless individuals in congregate shelter settings versus those in individual private room shelter arrangements. The results were not subtle. People in private individual shelters, even very small ones, showed significantly lower rates of anxiety, better sleep quality, higher rates of engagement with social services and employment programs, and higher rates of successful transition to permanent housing. The mechanism is not complicated once you think about it. A congregate shelter, even a well-run one, requires you to manage your personal safety, your belongings, and your emotional state in a shared space with strangers 24 hours a day. That is an exhausting cognitive load that compounds over time. It makes it harder to sleep, harder to think, harder to plan, and harder to believe that your situation is temporary rather than permanent. A locked door changes that calculation. A locked door says, "This space is mine. My things are safe here. I can sleep here. I can cry here. I can think about tomorrow here." Residents of pipe home communities across Europe and Asia have described the moment they first locked their door as the moment they began to feel like a person again rather than a problem. That is not a small thing to give someone. That is not a secondary consideration. That is the mechanism by which housing actually works. One resident of a pipe home community in South Korea, a man in his late 50s who had been homeless for 6 years before moving into a pipe unit, described his first night inside as the first night in years he did not sleep with one hand on his back. 6 years of sleeping with one hand on his back. Think about that the next time someone tells you that a concrete pipe is not a dignified housing solution. The fight with local government. Of course, the city has opinions. The city always has opinions. And those opinions almost never arrive with a warm handshake and a congratulations. Zoning laws in most American municipalities were written in an era when the concept of a concrete pipe as a residential unit was not something any planning commissioner had ever been asked to consider seriously. The result is a legal landscape that is, to put it charitably, complicated, and to put it accurately, a wall. Most residential zoning codes require a minimum square footage for any habitable structure, typically between 100 and 150 square feet of enclosed floor space. A 6-foot diameter pipe home offers approximately 28 square feet of usable floor area. That is not a rounding error. That is a structural conflict between the code and the concept. Building codes compound the problem. Residential structures in most jurisdictions require connection to municipal water and sewer, minimum ceiling heights of at least 7 feet, natural light requirements met by windows of specific minimum size, and electrical systems that comply with the National Electrical Code. A pipe home, as designed and deployed for emergency use, typically meets none of those requirements, which means that in most American cities, a pipe home community cannot be permitted as residential housing. It gets classified at best as a temporary emergency shelter, which is a legal category that comes with its own set of restrictions, oversight requirements, and sunset clauses that limit how long the community can operate. Cities that have moved toward embracing the concept, including a handful of municipalities in California and Oregon, where the homelessness crisis has made experimentation politically survivable, have done so by creating new emergency shelter overlay zones that allow non-standard structures on designated parcels without requiring full residential building code compliance. These zones are hard to create and easy to challenge. A single neighborhood association with the right attorney can tie one up in litigation for years. The cities that have confiscated or demolished pipe home installations have done so using the same argument Los Angeles used when it sent sanitation trucks after Elvis Summers' tiny houses: safety hazard, which is a phrase that covers a great deal of ground and requires very little evidence when the structure in question is built from materials that the existing code simply never contemplated. And yet the gap between what the code allows and what people sleeping outside tonight actually need remains exactly as large as it was the day those codes were written. The code does not sleep outside. The code does not have one hand on its bag. The people building them right now. While the zoning lawyers argue some people have decided to just start building. In California, a nonprofit called Edis Architecture and Urban Design partnered with the California College of the Arts to design a formalized pipe home unit intended for rapid deployment in sanctioned encampment sites. The students designed the units in the classroom, stress-tested the designs in the workshop, and worked with a manufacturer to produce the first run of units at a cost that came in under $3,000 per home. Architecture school students building actual homes for actual people. If that sentence does not restore some small piece of your faith in the next generation, I do not know what to tell you. In South Korea, the nonprofit organization Positive Nexus worked with the Seoul city government to deploy a pilot community of pipe homes in the Yongsan district, one of the city's highest concentration homeless areas. The pilot housed 32 individuals for an 18-month trial period. At the end of the trial, 26 of the 32 participants had connected with social services they had previously refused to engage with. 19 had moved into longer-term transitional housing. The city called the pilot a success and began planning a second phase. In the United States, individual builders have taken the concept off the paper and onto the ground without waiting for anyone's permission or approval. A retired construction worker in rural Oregon built 4 pipe homes on his own property and offered them to homeless individuals in his county for free, relying on the same rural building code exemptions that Tamara Williams used for her container home in Mississippi. Structures under a certain square footage, not connected to municipal water or sewer, on private land in unincorporated areas, often fall beneath the permit threshold entirely. It is not a loophole exactly. It is a gap in a system that was never designed to handle what is currently happening on American streets. A group of college students in Portland built 3 pipe homes over a single summer as a senior capstone project, partnering with a local homeless services organization to place the units with individuals who had been sleeping unsheltered for more than a year. They raised the materials budget through a crowdfunding campaign that hit its goal in 4 days. 4 days, because apparently when you show people a concrete pipe and explain that it is someone's home, they reach for their wallets faster than when you show them a 5-year capital campaign for an affordable housing development that will break ground sometime around 2030. One pipe at a time, there are 750,000 people out there tonight with nowhere to go. That is the number we started with, and it is the number we are going to end with, because it is the number that matters. Not the zoning laws, not the building codes, not the permit timelines, the number. And here is what a concrete pipe offers against that number. Not a solution. Not an answer to the structural forces that create homelessness in the first place, the wages that do not cover rent, the mental health system that has been underfunded for 40 years, the addiction treatment infrastructure that is nowhere near adequate, the domestic violence pipeline that puts women and children on the street with 48 hours notice. A pipe home does not fix any of that. Nobody is pretending it does. What it offers is a door, and a lock, and a curved wall that holds the quiet inside and keeps the street noise out, and a sleeping platform that is not the ground, and enough interior temperature stability that a person can close their eyes and stay asleep until morning without the cold waking them up at 2 in the morning or the sound of footsteps making them sit up fast with their heart going. What it offers is the thing that the research says makes every other intervention more likely to work. Privacy, safety, the cognitive space to think about tomorrow instead of just surviving tonight. A man in South Korea put one hand on his bag every night for 6 years. And then someone put a concrete pipe in front of him with a wooden door and a deadbolt, and he stopped. He just stopped doing that. And he started doing other things instead, like sleeping, like meeting with the case manager, like thinking about what came next. That is what $2,500 buys. Not a permanent home, not a solved life, just enough stability for a person to stop spending all of their energy surviving and start spending some of it rebuilding. A concrete pipe, a wooden door, a lock that belongs to the person inside. It is not the whole answer. But for the person crawling through that door tonight for the first time, locking it behind them, lying down on the sleeping platform, and listening to the street noise go quiet on the other side of 8 inches of concrete, it might be exactly enough to make tomorrow possible. And sometimes tomorrow possible is everything. If this video made you think differently about what a home actually is and what it actually takes to give one to someone, hit subscribe. We cover stories like this every week, the kind nobody else is telling. Click the video on screen right now. What I covered there connects directly to everything you just watched. I will see you in that one.